But I grew up in a gravel pit around machinery. I was a tomboy. I naturally had that inclination to go opposite of what everyone was doing, I guess. I get a lot of hands-on experience, and that's good for me. I like having all those tools. My hand intelligence has all of a sudden come to life. It definitely wasn't always there, but yeah, it's progressed a fair amount in the past year. And I like defying what is the norm. Working in a place like this, I'm able to deal with it well. I know how to interact with males. They respect me for some reason because I'm strong. I'm stronger than I look. People are always shocked when I lift a 70-pound bag of coal like it's nothing or something like that. So yeah, I don't look like it, but I am definitely built for manual labor and that kind of physical exertion. And working in a place like this, I get a high off of sweating and just working hard. I enjoy that.
Irian and I are partners in transforming her grandfather's shotgun into a work of art. But she grew up in southern Ontario in a Mennonite peace tradition, but I grew up in New Mexico among guns. I came of age in a country where guns are used to define who is an American and who is a man. A gun is a tool. If you turn that tool on people, it's a weapon. If you think of your kitchen knife, you use that on carrots, well then it's a kitchen tool. But if you turn that knife on yourself or on an intruder, then it's a weapon. Or you can think of your car. If you use it to drive your grandma to the hospital, it's a means of transportation. But if you get drunk and you drive it through a soccer van full of kids, it's a weapon. Besides functioning as a tool or as a weapon, a gun is a symbol. To quote Marty Robbins from an old country song, "With a big iron on my hip, I'm a handsome Texas Ranger. With a pink pistol tucked discreetly in my concealed carry purse," to quote a current website, "I'm armed and feminine." Our imaginations use symbols as building blocks for advertising, politics, religion, art. The National Rifle Association, the Canadian Firearms Association, and the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights want us to imagine that guns will protect us and those we love. They want us to believe in guns, to have faith in firearms. So gun violence isn't just a legal problem, it's also a religious problem. It's about ultimate values, those that we are willing to die for. After the shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, I wanted to bring my dad's .300 Savage, a deer rifle, from Texas to Canada. But in order to do that, I'd have to get myself licensed for firearms, and I'd have to use an organization like Irian Guns to bring it across the border. So Irian and I decided to use her grandfather's shotgun instead. And she describes herself as gun shy, but I don't. I grew up with guns and I'm not gun shy. I do know how to use firearms. I grew up as a hunter in a country in which the ability to own guns and to use guns defined both who was an American and who was a man. By the time I was 3, Mom and Dad had equipped me with a pistol that hung to my knee. When my parents packed me on a horse, I was still a cowboy packing that pistol. One Christmas, I was jealous of my Texas cousin because he got 2 pearl-handled cap guns. And in a kid's brain, well, having more guns makes you definitely a bigger, better man. Later, when I had 2 pistols, Mom took a picture of me and she wrote below it, "Wild Bill Hickok." Now, little boys, they long for real guns. Well, when I was a kid, that was a BB gun, but now it's an AR-15. Here's a picture of Dad in his last years. He's posing with a powder rifle beside his restored Packard. When I became a father, I taught my son, who was no taller than my belt, how to shoot. But it's no comfort to me now to know that both my dad and my son crossed the Great Divide knowing how to shoot, because guns won't protect you from the things that are most likely to kill you. I grew up wired to cowboy movies, so I knew exactly what good men and bad men looked like. Good men had white skin and wore white hats. They protected women and children. Bad men, they wore black hats, had dark skin, and hid behind scruffy beards. Good men could always outdraw bad men. As a kid, I couldn't imagine it otherwise. After the mass murder in Pittsburgh's Tree of Life synagogue in 2018, the U.S. president recommended arming the synagogue rather than tightening gun laws. Tutored by the NRA, gun toters believe that schools and religious institutions are best protected by good men with guns who will save us from bad men with guns. But most adults know that good and evil are not so easy to distinguish. And maybe you know that quotation from Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and to destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. How did our imaginations become so stunted that we bought into these good guy, bad guy scenarios? Well, our parents taught us, so did movies, books, the media. And as kids, we played them, we performed them. Then as adults, we believed them. We turned make-believe into belief. And we sanctified those beliefs, treating them as ultimate, as beyond question. And we ritualized those beliefs. We embodied them as ultimate values. When I first began watching European crime movies, it made me edgy to watch British or Norwegian officers pursuing bad guys down dark alleys or upstairs without guns. So I couldn't imagine safety without firearms. So to illustrate to you how gun conditioned I think our imaginations are, I want to show you some images. Anybody can find these with Google search, so there's nothing special about the images. And also some of the images are pretty disturbing, so consider yourself to have a very literal trigger warning. The other caveat is I'm talking about the images. I'm not talking about the people that show up in the photographs because I don't know anything about the people. Rather, I'm talking about how either we as viewers or gun manufacturers, clothing manufacturers, imagine viewers. We're accustomed to images of fathers or grandfathers teaching white boys how to use guns. And if the images appear to be about safety or intergenerational male bonding, and the aim seems to be taking of game, well then we accept them as normal. But what if we trade the grandfatherly shotgun for an AR-15 style rifle that holds 30 rounds that can be fired in, say, 20 seconds? And we put those in the hands of unsupervised boys. Well, you probably don't want them coming to your school. Look at these two images. Which image stirs your fears the most? White boys with AR-15s or Syrian boys with pistols? Toy pistols. We don't imagine others in the same way we imagine ourselves. If we do it, we call it self-defense. If they do it, it's terrorism. But who are these others? Nazi Youth Corps? ISIS child soldiers? On the left, Geronimo and his Apache warriors are dead, so we can allow ourselves to admire their courage. But if armed confrontation happens in Canada, not south of the border in the US, and if the confrontation is just outside Montreal in 1990, who is the other here? The masked indigenous resistor on the right or the helmeted Canadian soldier on the left? Who's the invader? In 2016, the Violence Policy Center issued a report called Start Them Young. And it demonstrates how gun manufacturers and clothing manufacturers, gun lobbyists and so on, are now beginning to advertise to and to arm children. And I don't just mean teenagers, I mean young children, like between 6 and 12. On the left, if adults need matching purses and shoes, well, why not a pink rifle to accessorize a pink coat for a girl? And on the right, I'm imagining this girl shoots rabbits in a rural area. But you have to ask, what's a pistol for? Pistols are better designed for killing people than killing rabbits. These pink rifles, however, seem like toys alongside AR-15s. This gun is lighter, it doesn't kick so much, and it keeps reappearing in mass murders. An outdoor concert in Las Vegas, an Orlando nightclub, an elementary school in Connecticut, church in Texas, a high school in Florida. It keeps showing up. Start them young. That's the mantra chanted not only by gun makers, but toy and clothing manufacturers too. I got these guns from my daddy. You start in babyhood, not just childhood. Gun manufacturers began some time ago marketing guns to women. The movie and fashion industry quickly capitalized on the fetishizing of guns. At the left is Lara Croft from Tomb Raider. She's the queen of firearms competence on the silver screen. Well, guns, big ones, appear on runways of the fashion world. At the left, in cowboy action shooting clubs, cowgirls dress up. They love their pistols, probably their horses too. On the right, in the calendar called Tactical Girl, there's usually more flesh than you see here. And does it matter that cactus and rattlesnakes would feast on your calves? As they say, beautiful girls, beautiful guns. In this picture, fear drives a fantasy. The caption says, "It's dangerous to go alone. Take this." Of course, this beast of a gun won't fit into your purse, so this really is a fantasy. This gun won't protect you against date rape. But in the other picture, sometimes the marketing is practical. Women's gun clubs are now beginning to emerge. This one is from Armed and Feminine. In some states, you can openly pack your pistol to the grocery store. In other states, you may want a concealed carry purse. It's practical, you know. You pack your pistol, carry it on a blind date, to school, even to church. Our white gun-toting fantasies are sometimes sexist and often racist. If we change the color, age, gender, or nationality of the shooters, how does the discussion change? If your neighborhood or country is under constant attack, you may have a more compelling reason to be armed. So far we've been considering images of shooters, but what are they shooting at? Take a look at some of these target images. To the left is a generic male target. The kill spots are marked with higher numbers. To the right, in case you don't recognize the profile, the hoodie, the phone, the bag of Skittles, is a Trayvon Martin target. In 2012, he was killed in Florida, which has a stand your ground law. To the left is a target used by North Miami Beach police using mugshots of arrested black men. When a National Guardswoman recognized her brother in one of the pictures, this target created a huge public scandal. And to the right, you'll see a target that you could never find, almost never find. In fact, I can't find this one again. It's of a white boy. If you did find such a target, and he was your son or your lover or your brother, what would you do? These targets of Muslims were actually used by TRADOC, the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command. Get the religious language. Are there targets of Christians? Well, not really, or perhaps indirectly in political cartoons. And who are we shooting for? Well, you could probably guess it. To the left is Jesus, a lone sportsman. You can imagine he's waiting for a deer. And on the right, gentle Jesus is teaching a child to use a pistol. In another version of this image, the caption has Jesus whispering into the kid's ear. Listen, he says. Just forget all that crap about turning the other cheek, loving your enemies, and returning good for evil. If Jesus had a gun, he'd still be alive today. If Jesus had only followed the NRA's advice, good men with guns could save good people from bad men with guns and, incidentally, save themselves. At the left is Jesus playing Rambo. In the movie, Rambo is a former Green Beret. After the Vietnam War, he's driven by PTSD to righteous violence. To the right is a muscle-bound, machine gun-laden Jesus Rambo video game shooter, carrying blasters almost as big as he is. When the weapon is bigger than the man, what does that tell you? To the left, an old six-shooter rests comfortably atop the good book. The image reminds me of Bible and Pocket Gun in Hand, which is a book about gun-toting men of God. Then to the right is a contemporary version of the same kind of picture with an automatic pistol to protect an already heavily defended Christian way of life. And in these two pictures, the newly reimagined Christian family. And as you can see, the Holy Spirit descends on the well-armed. After the election of Barack Obama as president, I had a phone conversation with my brother, and he said, "Do you know what's going on down here?" And I said, "I have no idea what's going on. What are Texans doing?" And he said, "They're out buying guns." And I said, "Well, why are they buying guns? They already have guns, right?" And he said, "Yeah, of course." He said, "But they're afraid Obama will take away their right to own guns, and they think there's going to be a race war." And that stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, the Civil War is not finished. I began giving up arms as I crossed the Canadian border in the mid-1970s. Not because I couldn't bring my guns here. I could legally have brought them here, but it just seemed to me an insult to a country like Canada to carry guns into it. So I started at that point giving up my guns. In fact, I sold my last gun before I crossed the Canadian border. The U.S. is one of the most well-defended, heavily armed countries in the world, but Americans are afraid. Now, 9/11, of course, was tragic, and it was a wake-up call, but that's not enough to account for the rampant fear. Although it's supposedly un-American to be afraid, after the Civil War, Americans were afraid of slave revolts, and the Second Amendment was driven by this fear. Then there were waves of immigrants, Spanish, French, English, Germans, Italians, Irish, Koreans, Japanese, Vietnamese, Middle Easterners. The list goes on and on. But the bottom line is that we became a nation of immigrants, afraid of immigrants. From World War II through the Korean conflict, the Vietnam War, the invasion of Iraq, the election of Trump, Americans have gone from being heroes to being bullies. Bullies like to push their way in and then push others out. Bullies are afraid of losing their positions, though. So arms, clothing, and toy manufacturers, along with target makers, game designers, and movie makers, are busy reimagining weapons to capitalize on this bully fear. Armed, they imagine they're safe. The challenge for those of us who have no faith in arms is to imagine things otherwise. Inspired by the arms to art movement, sometimes called the guns to garden movement, that's now emerging around the globe, Irian and I have taken a small step to imagine things otherwise. Guns into Plowshares is a 16-foot tall, 4-ton sculpture of a plow, and it embeds 3,000 handguns collected from around Washington, D.C. And this sculpture was inspired by a passage from Isaiah 2:4. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Inspired by the same biblical passage, Raw Tools of Colorado Springs transforms guns into agricultural tools. One of the best-known arms to art projects is by the Mexican artist Pedro Reyes. He used 6,700 weapons seized in wars by the Mexican army to make a series of musical instruments. Lead to Life is a group that turns weapons into shovels and uses those shovels for ritual tree planting at sites of violence. Gonzalo Mabunda recycles weapons recovered from Mozambique's 16-year civil war into art objects. Al Farrow of Brooklyn builds reliquaries, small sacred spaces like synagogues, churches, and mosques, from recycled weapon parts, from bullets, guns, cartridges?
Basically taking the idea that a gun is used for killing, and to me that's just what happened in the States with all the school shootings and stuff. That's just so wrong and kind of sickening to me. Taking that idea of violence coming, this bullet coming out of the gun to kill someone, instead I'm going to forge the end of the barrel into a rose stem, put rose leaves and stuff on it, and then create the rose bud, like the flower on the end of it. And then also to encase the gun in vines and leaves and thorns, because just to show that it's been grown over and completely encased in something so beautiful as a rose and thorns. If I finish and if it's successful, I'll have this beautiful...
There's no if I finish, right?
If it's successful, if it looks good, I will have that. I will have the physical, just a completion of an art piece, a completion of a project that is so gratifying to me. So there's that element. And then there's also the implication of that. This gun shows this vine just creeping over it, completely shrouded in beauty, and it cannot be used for violence anymore. It's just completely shut off that access.
So you're happier with it now?
Oh,
Does it still have its same title?
Yeah.
Have you changed its name?
no, I think gun shy is kind of good. And it looks good. Smile! Would it be worth it to do like an angle shot on it?
Well, you're the artist, right? So it's how you want to present it.
Now, I've criticized the fear-driven capitalizing that feeds on the fetishizing of guns. But responsible scholarship, I think, also questions itself. If, for example, we were to change the context of gun shy, not showing it at a film, but taking it, for example, to a gun show and making it say, the door prize, that would change its meaning. In other words, its function or its meaning might not match our intentions. So we have to ask ourselves whether gun shy might, in fact, mystify weapons rather than demystify them. Guns and roses are a favorite motif for tattoos. Also for the logos of musical groups ranging from Guns N' Roses to Pistol Annies, an American country and western group. The gun is a powerful symbol, but are these logos pro or anti-gun? We'd have to interview the designers, but even then, we still wouldn't know how the images are received, how they're interpreted by viewers. Consider now a second example, the armor of God. Thack Ironworks, where Irian works, makes armor, helmets, shields, and so on for a niche global market that requires armor and arms for fantasy movies and historic reenactments, but also for churches that love the armor of God symbol. It's based on Ephesians 6:10 through 17, and several symbols there are linked into a system: the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, the shield of faith, and so on. Paul the writer is talking about spiritual warfare, of course, but the symbol is easily co-opted into aggressive militarism, as in the medieval crusades on the left, or into militant nationalism represented in the t-shirt on the right from the website Sergeant Grit, which sells U.S. Marine paraphernalia. Most of the armor of God figures are male, but there are female versions too, often in defensive or submissive postures. So Guns N' Roses can swing either way, pro or anti-weapon. The same is true of the armor of God. So I close with a question that we have to ask ourselves and that we ask you. With what practices and what images can we most effectively cultivate a non-aggressive, non-defensive posture toward guns?